A battered and beaten JoJo stood across from Dio and his forces. His master killed, the love of his life held hostage. Having come to the realization that the god Nabu, whom had helped train JoJo in the mastery of the power of Haman, had actually been using him. He had been nothing more but the perfect vessel for which Nabu could use to strike his righteous justice against Wotan, the master sorcerer of darkness and evil. Now that the deed had been committed, in his anger JoJo had removed the helmet of fate, thus stripping away Nabu's main force of power. His body, it felt nothing but excruciating pain, as Nabu had pushed it to its absolute limits to channel as much of his power as possible. And as for Dio, well, he'd gained everything he could ever want. The bane of his existence, Wotan, who had been lording over him, commanding him, bossing him around, was now dead. JoJo was weakened, and now he had an entire army under his command. Oh yes, things were going to change. All in his favor. Tell me, JoJo, how does it feel? You thought that you'd come back a conquering hero, only to realize that you were nothing more but a fool. But that's nothing new. You were always that way. I knew it from the first day we ever met. You are nothing but the son of a rich aristocrat, a jackass through and through. You try to see the goodness in others, always wanting to give them the benefit of the doubt. And look at where it's gotten you. Your father was the king of fools. Do you want to know what truly made me sick? Every day in my life pretending like I loved him. Always trying to shower him with love and praise. Acting like he was a father to me. Maybe compared to my own old man, he's definitely night and day to say the least, but still, I despised you both. But I had to play nice. I had to be the bigger person. You know, at first I was just going to poison him. Once he passed away, we could split the assets. And then you'd pass away in a tragic accident, and I'd inherit that as well. But when I saw it all for the taking in one fell swoop, the stone mask, the tomb, all of it. But there were a few delays, such as Wotan, believing that he was the master of me of all people. I had just bided my time. And you did the work for me, killing him. And now all of London, all of Great England is under my command soon. And then I will gain the world. You're greedy, Dio, Jonathan would say, as he tried to steady his shallow breaths, trying to gain control over his Haman. All you know is endless greed. Your stomach is nothing but a bottomless pit, a gullet that can never be filled. You could gain the world, Dio, but then you'd only want the stars. And after the stars, you'd go for even greater celestial bodies, because it could never be enough. And why should it? Tell me, JoJo, why should we limit ourselves? Look at you and I. Do you think that we're ordinary? We have grown far past mere mortal men. We have the power of gods, coursing through our veins. And yet, even still, you act like you're no different than them. I think that's why I've always hated you. This false sense of humility, believing that you're something you truly aren't. And what is that? You are privileged. That is what you are. You aren't like me. I was born in the gutters, nothing but a sewer rat, with not a penny to his name. I was nothing. I came from nothing. But you were born with a golden spoon in your mouth. You never wanted for anything. You had the world in the palm of your hands. But yet you act like you don't. You walk around amongst the people and you act like you're one of them. And I know that's not the case. That's not the truth. It could never be. Is that what you really think of me, Dio? Or is that simply what you think of yourself? You think that just because you came from bad circumstances, that it gives you an excuse for your behavior, to act the way that you do, to do the things that you do. And my existence pisses you off, because you see that it wasn't because of circumstance that stopped you from achieving your greatness, but it was because of your own evil, your own selfish mindset. Your father may have truly been a terrible man, indeed, and there is no excuse for that. But your father gave you something, an opportunity for a better life. You were given that opportunity. And what have you done with it? At every turn, at every waking moment, you wish for more. You are selfish, you are vain, you are petty, you are a fool. Because you had everything you could have ever wanted, and yet you were too blind to realize it. Or maybe you have. And perhaps my existence serves as a stark reminder. Because in the end, you never had the strength to rise, the strength to be better. Perhaps. Or, allow me to try a rhetorical. Dio would create large, jagged spikes of ice, encasing Jonathan and freezing him in place. Here's a rebuttal. I don't give a damn about you, or about what you think. What? You think I'm jealous of you? Far from it. I believe, quite frankly, that you have what I want. And when I see something I want, I'm going to take it. Because that's how the world works. The strong take what they want, the weak shrivel up on the ground and they die. I am far from weak, Dio. And yet you are the one encased by me. My power is far greater than yours. And now, I get to finish what I started a long time ago. I don't think so. Turquoise blue. Overdrive! Jonathan would run his hamon through the ice that encased him, breaking himself free and sending Dio back. He would immediately pick up a sword that was lying on the ground. Doing so, he would channel his hamon through the blade, striking down at the monsters that were holding Irina. It took every ounce of willpower and force for him to move his body. The hamon that he was channeling could only heal himself but for so much. He was preparing to reach back for the helmet, only for Dio to kick it away from him. He would then deliver a devastating backhand, knocking Jonathan to the ground as Irina raced to his side. I don't think so. As long as I'm standing, you won't be putting that damned helmet back on. The source of your power, is it not? No, Jonathan. We're gonna do things the old-fashioned way. On your feet. Jojo! Irina, I always knew you were alive. I never lost faith, not even for a moment. I always knew you would return. Deep in my heart of hearts, I knew that you could not have fell to this evil. And my prayers were answered because you lived before me. I promise you, your fate will not be in vain. But stand behind me, my love. I will deal with this vile creature. Jonathan would channel the Haman to his fist, raising them up as Dio smirked. It'll be just like when we were in grade school. I get to embarrass you in front of your bitch once again by kicking your pathetic ass. I will make you eat those words, Dio. I'm not the same kid I was back then. I've grown. Your ego, maybe, but your power, I'd beg to differ. The two would engage in hand-to-hand combat. Even in his beaten-down state, he shouldn't have had the strength to even lift his arms, let alone to connect with any force of real power. And yet Dio could feel the devastating blows that connected to him. For Jonathan, the pain was far beyond anything he'd ever experienced in his life. What was keeping him going? What was keeping him moving? Every time he felt like he was going to fall to the ground, it was as if there was some force, some invisible nature that was keeping him upright. Was it the spirits of comrades long since gone? Was it the spirit of his father, the spirit of Mr. Zappelli? Perhaps a combination of everything and yet nothing. Was it through his own sheer force of will? Was his willpower that strong? The room was continuing to burn off, the top of Big Ben setting to collapse. JoJo knew that he wouldn't have much of a chance in his current state. Making a break for it at the last moment, he would grab hold of Irina and jump out of the window. They could see the fighting that still persisted down below. Thankfully, he still had the cloak. Using it, he would channel his Haman through the robes, allowing him to fly. It was altered, Irina holding on for dear life as they descended down below, crashing into the trees. He knew that they couldn't have come out unscathed, but at the very least they were alive. The top of Big Ben would finally explode with Dio descending down upon them. For Speedwagon and his men, the battle seemed all but even out at this point. Between Wotan's undead zombies, Dio's vampires, and the rebellion fighting in a three-way deadlock for supremacy, they were just barely coming out on top. But now, the head vampire himself had stepped onto the scene. "That's the blasted devil," Speedwagon would say. As he cocked his gun, he was preparing to give chase when he saw something in particular falling off in the opposite direction. "No, that looks like..." Speedwagon would race towards the object that he had seen falling, leaving Dio to go after Jonathan. His leg was indeed broke. He had to focus as much Haman to the left leg as possible just to be able to stand. As Irina, while cut and a bit bruised, was fine. Jonathan had protected her, just as he always had. "Jojo!" "It's fine, Irina. No need to worry. Little more than a flesh wound. It will take care of itself. I promise. It'll be all right." Now, Jojo. Don't go making promises you can't keep. The two of them turned to see Dio walking towards them slowly. You have nowhere else to run, JoJo. Who says I'm running? I'm ready whenever you are, Dio. Dio would proceed to beat Jonathan mercilessly, finally stomping him into the ground as Irina threw herself over him. He started to step on her as well, her shrieking shrieks of pain and agony breaking Jonathan's heart as he desperately tried to shield her in turn. Even if it were just throwing his pathetic body, he would try to spare her from the pain. Truly, this is beautiful. A couple of weaklings trying to protect themselves, protect each other. It's useless. Useless. Absolutely useless. But the tragic tale of Romeo and Juliet echoes all around us at this moment. Two star-crossed lovers. You can both enjoy each other's embraces as you die. Now, Mr. Brando, don't go being so hasty. What? Multiple gunshots would be fired, all directly at the head. It was Speedwagon. He dropped his gun before pulling out another and continuing to fire. Speedwagon! Take hold, JoJo. You're not done yet. Speedwagon would throw the helmet of fate to Jonathan as he took out now 2 pistols, racing towards Dio, firing with everything he had. You're gonna pay for every life you took, Brando. This is your karma. He emptied out both pistols before pulling out the gas gun, shooting out the remaining vestiges of his smoke towards Dio. In a fit of rage, he absorbed all of the smoke inside of himself to keep his vision from being obstructed. He had nothing left now but the sun-tipped dagger. As he pulled it out, Dio would race towards him, ready to bury his talon-like claws into his gut and rip out his inner organs. At the last moment, Speedwagon would move out of the way, as Dio had managed to cut his side deeply. However, Speedwagon would get in one more hit, as he stabbed Dio right in the neck. Dio would shoot out a great force of power, the shockwave knocking Speedwagon's back against a tree. He felt something snap in that moment. He broke his neck. Speedwagon! Enough of you, you insignificant worm. It's all up to you, JoJo. Jonathan would use his remaining strength as he slipped the helmet of fate back onto himself. Once again, the connection to Naboo had been restored. Jonathan, there's no time for that, Naboo. Whatever's left, defeat my enemy. I can't. If I do this, you will die. Your body has used too much of my power. There's not enough Haman that can keep it. I didn't ask you that. You've told me to have faith, haven't you? For all this time. Well, I don't give a damn about what bloody futures you see. Destiny is not something that can be written by any sort of deity. It is what we choose to make it. This is my destiny, to save the people I love, to save my home. I will bring down Dio. and I will survive this. Very well, Jonathan Joestar. Dio looked up to see Jonathan aglow once again. He stood high above him, becoming almost like the sun itself. Dio would lunge towards Irina, desperate to find some source of power. Blood was the key. But the moment he tried to reach towards her, a shield would protect her from his grasp. Multiple shields forming around him, encaging him like a trapped bird. It is over, Dio. This is your judgment. You have been weighed on the scales of order and chaos, and you have been found lacking. Your evil will be purged. What was wrong will be corrected. Says forth Dr. Fate. No. In a giant flash of light, the fog would be dissipated, and slowly the sun would start to rise anew. For the first time in almost 3 years, the rays of sun shined upon the land. In his terror, Dio would begin to flee, running for his life, only to be stopped by Jonathan, who stood in front of him. He would form multiple slashing motions with his hand before shooting out the striking light blades towards Dio, cutting him into pieces and leaving him there. You can't do this to me. This is your punishment. The son that you feared so much will be the one to execute divine judgment. Dio's severed head would face to where the sun would rise. When the sun greets your face, you will be expelled by the light. Jonathan would now leave him, Dio yelling, cursing his very name. This isn't over. You hear me, Joestar? I will be the curse upon you and all of your family, your children and your children's children and your children's children's children. I will be a blight upon the Joestar family. Do you hear me? JoJo! Jonathan walked off until he eventually found where both Irina and Speedwagon were. As he placed his hand upon Speedwagon's back, he used Haman to reverse the damage, saving him from his broken neck and spine, and allowing him to walk and gain faculty over his feeling once more. As for Jonathan, he rested against a tree stump, sliding down till he sat himself upon the ground itself. Irina would attempt to remove the helmet, but Nabu would warn against this. He is in a very critical state right now. If you remove my power, he will die. Then what do we do? Speedwagon would ask. You can only wait. Give him a place to rest and allow my power to flow through him. The sun would eventually rise, and both the armies of Wotan and Dio would disintegrate, turning of ash to the wind. The citizens and the people who hid in fear would now step out of their homes once more, stepping into the light of day. As for Jonathan, he was placed inside of a particular type of coffin, kept in the Joestar home. The coffin was kept in a private room, where his body laid for a full year. Every day, Irina waited by his side, waiting for the day that he would awaken. And eventually that day came. When the sarcophagus was opened, and Jonathan came stepping out, she rushed as she embraced into his arms. As for Jonathan, it seemed he had defied the odds once again. And through the valley of darkness, he had come out on the other side. A time for rebuilding would commence. The scars of Dio's rampage, though faint, would never be forgotten. Eventually, Jonathan and Irina would marry, and they would sell the old Joestar estate. They were preparing to make a new life for themselves as they journeyed to America. They were going via a ship, a honeymoon of sorts. As for the helmet of fate, Jonathan kept it inside of a chest with a lock powered by Haman. Only he or anyone who had the ability to use Haman could open it. Keeping it secured with him, both Irina and Jonathan would enjoy themselves on the cruise ship. But unfortunately, a shadow, a ghost from the past, would resurrect itself once more. There would be an explosion, crew members and other passengers trapped below deck. Irina asked if Jonathan needed to grab the helmet of fate, but Jonathan reassured her that everything would be fine. He promised to return. As he descended down below, a fire had opened up inside of the engine room. Jonathan tried to save as many people as he could, but unfortunately he had found himself ensnared in a trap. Because standing before him was a minion, a vampire, carrying with him a tube, a large encasement, with a floating head in a suspicious liquid. But upon a clearer view, he saw that it was none other than the head of Dio Brando. The glass case would open up, tendrils shooting from the severed head of Dio, shooting right into Jonathan, piercing him and taking hold. I told you, JoJo. I told you that this wouldn't be the end. Now, you and I will become one. Using what little strength he had left, Jonathan would kill the would-be assassin, holding on to Dio's head. The ship would now need to be abandoned and Irina would be taken off, along with the few bags she could muster and the chest in question. She pleaded with them to wait for her husband, but she watched in horror as the ship would explode, the vestige sinking to the watery depths down below. Her husband joining into his final resting place, a burial at sea. What happened between Jonathan and Dio in their final moments? Perhaps They both crossed to the other side. Was this the end of them both? History says so, but ancient tales say another. What do you believe? This is the tale of Jonathan Joestar. The tale of Dr. Fate. But it is only one of many. For what started in the ancient tomb of Mesopotamia, it has led to a legacy that has lived on through the ages. A legacy of great warriors, of a family burdened with a destiny that would lead them to become warriors of the light, who battle against the forces of evil. This is only but the first tale of said heroes. For soon, a new legacy would be born, and the journey would start anew. This concludes JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, The Star of Fate. What If Jonathan Joestar Was Dr. Fate, Season 1, Part 6, the Season 1 finale. As always, when we get to the end of a season, I want to take the time to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who has followed along with this story. It was definitely a last-minute, late addition, to say the least, but it was one that I had a lot of fun working on. I had a lot of fun writing, and even if it doesn't turn out to be the most popular, in the grand scheme of things, it is going to add to the lore and continuity of the anime DC Comics crossover storylines as we build more of the lore of our version of Earth 2. So I do hope you'll stick around. We continue on next week with a much more news stories in the lineup for anime DC Comics. So please stick around for everything that is to come out now and in the future. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions in Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.